Hey,
Hey, Doug.
can you
How's it
hear?
going?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Yep.
Awesome. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Glad to connect.
Yeah, me too. Um, well, I'm really grateful for your time here, and I wanted to share a few things with you. And like I said earlier, give you a little bit of a presentation that I've been
Mm-hmm.
preparing, I've been thinking about for a while, and then wanted to maybe have a launch pad after that as we can kind of talk about some things. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you've been exploring too. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great. Yeah. You should be able to share your screen already, but let me know if that's not working.
Yeah, I see it. All right.
Great.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to start the slideshow. All right. Well, the first thing I want to just lay out here is maybe the reason why I want to connect with you and to just present this stuff is uh, it's part of my own vocation to make meaning of who I am and what I do. So I've always had this really intense drive inside of me ever since I was a little kid, seeking experiences that would polarize me more into this self discovery. And when I discovered some of the different material that I'll be talking about, they just keep uh, opening up doors. And one of those doors that was opened up to me about it, I guess 2 years ago, was your work. And I had worked with, I had studied some Whitehead in college and graduate school, but it was your particular presentation that became a bit of a muse for me, if you will, to dive into Whitehead. And then Andrew Davis as well, and a lot of the different process thinking, Jamie Daniels and others. And so as I dove into that, as well as continuing to hone my skills as a mental health counselor with a particular vocation, a desire to express myself in a certain way, I always try to create a praxis model to take what I'm learning and put it into practice and then try it out with my clients and also in my personal life. And so that's a bit of what I'm going to be sharing with you uh, with the emphasis on the macro. All right, so this is going to be taking some of the process thought, especially Whiteheadian thought, and looking at the like cosmogenesis, looking at some of these really big ideas and seeing if it can make sense as to what might be going on in the process of a macro concrescence here on Earth. If there's a macro concrescence inside of which many other smaller low-grade concrescences are happening, then that might be interesting to talk about. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been developing these thoughts for a couple of years. And so anyways, hopefully by the end of this presentation and also our conversation, I would like to be able to center it in on the nature of the Jesus Christ event and its effect on humanity and on the Creator as part of the Creator's own development. So I'm trying to tie in a lot of different things, and I'll be using concepts that I think you're familiar with. This wouldn't be a basic conversation for people not aware of a lot of different things. So several sources that I'm going to be drawing from. My personal ideas are the Catholic Christian background that I grew up in, particularly with an emphasis in Franciscanism. There is a channeled material that I really like and has been helpful for me, and it's called the raw material, but others know it as the Law of One material. Of course, Whitehead and process thought, and then my graduate work in clinical social work and then a master's in pastoral ministry. And I've been a therapist for about over 20 years, so I've had lots of mystical experiences. So all of this is my own synthesis for its good and for its distortions. So we'll just walk in. The launch pad here is what I see Whitehead doing in process thought. In fact, what I see in process thought in general, you might even think it might be the drive shaft behind process, behind evolution, is this idea of the law of three. Now, I've not heard you particularly name that as a cosmic law, but you certainly infer it in your work. I think one cannot infer it if you're doing process. So Cynthia Bourgeau is a teacher of mine, and a lot of people listening to this might recognize her voice. But anyways, she outlined these 4 different ideas or steps of the law of three. So I'm going to read them out loud. Number 1, in every new arising, there are 3 forces involved. You have the affirming force, the denying force, and the reconciling force. The affirming force, denying force, and reconciling force. 2, the interweaving of these 3 forces produces a 4th in a new dimension. So there's a new entree, a new order of being. Number 3, affirming, denying, and reconciling are not fixed points or permanent essence attributes, but can and do shift and must be discerned situationally. And 4, solutions to impasses or sticking points generally come by learning how to spot and mediate third force, which is present in every situation but generally hidden. Okay, so I've been a student of the law of three, of this cosmic law, for about 15 years, and I can tell you that I intentionally try to do that step 4, which is to help the client through the jazz of our relationship, the improvisation that's going on there, to help the client to uncover the hidden third force, and together we midwife that into a new becoming for them, a new sense of freedom. So I did a little bit of diagrams here. So we have the first force, the affirming force, going in one direction. And then we have a second force that goes into a different direction. I'm just kind of giving a visual representation. So now we have a third force, the reconciling force. And it's usually hidden, but if you can tap the power of that reconciling force, then there's the new arising. Just as a quick aside, but it's important, I just want to throw this in here. This is sort of my version in terms of the counseling and how I help with counseling. This is a way that I've developed it. So you have the affirming force. This would be status quo of somebody. Maybe somebody is in a relationship that is not healthy, but at the same time, it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. You know, it's kind of hard to leave that. So that would be an affirming force, status quo. Then there's a denying force of, let's say, this great desire to get out, or some hidden instinct that there is ambivalence here. On one hand, I want to stay. On the other hand, I don't know how. And that creates a contrast. All right. And I know that's a Whiteheadian idea. Sorry about that. That's a Whiteheadian idea. It's very important, but this is also right at the heart of the law of three. And this contrast is the dynamic tension that creates the midwifing, the process of potentiating the next dimension or order of being. Okay, so it says FaceTime just quit, so I don't know if that means we're okay on your side.
FaceTime is probably a different app. I think we're fine on Zoom.
Okay,
it's coming through clear on my end.
Okay, good. So the law of three, in terms of the reconciling force here, at the very crux, at the very heart of the contrast, it is taken as absolute truth that the seeds of hope are hidden in the soil of that contrast. They're hidden. And I'm really borrowing right now from Moltmann's idea of hope. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the definition. I've loved it. And that is, hope is the anticipation of a future joy. I'll get into joy here in a minute. But often people don't really have hope. But as someone walking with them, I can always hold that hope for them if they don't. But I'm trusting the cosmic law that the seeds of it are buried right in the soil of that contrast. And so the first stage of the reconciling force is understanding that there's a level of awareness that begins with low awareness of a contrast. Some people aren't even aware that there is a contrast. This would be the idea of being in denial of something. And then that slowly polarizes, potentiates into a higher level of the contrast. Yes, the contrast exists, but we're not yet moving into consciousness. I'm not yet deciding on what I'm going to do with it. But I can see that there is a contrast. That is into the second stage. The second stage would be the spectrum of consciousness. And that ranges from the low level of consciousness, or we might call it the subconscious. And then it moves all the way, potentiates into conscious awareness. And conscious awareness at the high end would be somebody who is uncomfortable with the contrast, or at least sees it as the tension that they want to move forward with. And so hope is felt. They're conscious of their values. The goals are clarified, and there's accountability system in place. And then that just kind of opens them up to move into the next dimension. And so I've just kind of shown it here as a way to use a fulcrum, and then it's being thrown over the former order of being. And now this new consciousness actually becomes the affirming force, the status quo of the next order of being. So that would be the law of three in terms of the counseling and sort of the activation. And what I wanted to do is pivot right now and talk about the metaphysics of the creator. All right, in terms of the law of three. And then I'll stop and ask you how you're resonating with this. Let's see. So this metaphysics is a synthesis of a lot of different things. So I'm putting together what makes a lot of sense to me, but it's not just something that I've intuited. It's been a dialogue between me and lots of sources. So we have this uncreated light. We have a catalyst, a spark. And with that, we have the onset of this infinite potential. Infinite potential, but finite actual. There's no actual expression. It's just infinite potential. This leads into this coincidence of opposites. And the coincidence of the new arising of the coincidence of opposites would be the dynamic of potentiation. This will make sense in just a minute, but I wanted to get a sense of how I'm thinking of a cosmogenesis here. So then we have, I need to move the, because we don't want to see this part. Okay, so we have the dynamic of potentiation is up here as the affirming force. And this is an aware principle. So there's a sense of being aware, but there's no consciousness yet. This consciousness begins to potentiate, awareness begins to potentiate into consciousness. Okay, so the law of one talks about the creator as the focusing principle. The creator is intelligent infinity, and it is an actual dynamic principle that creates focus and order out of chaos. So it is the idea of contrast creating tension, and is the flow and power behind focus. That is the creator. Then the law of one talks about when awareness comes to a potentiated level, that is consciousness. And the law of one calls this conscious light, potentiated light, and is known as intelligent energy. So intelligent energy is potentiated light, called love. This is love. So we have light, love, logos. The law of one equates love with logos. And it is the creative principle. So we have the focusing principle, and then we have the creative principle. And the creative principle then seeks to experience itself. And so there's a potentiation of experiencing itself as unity. In other words, awareness and consciousness come together with a desire to experience itself. The first creation is the sense of an identity called unity, that I am. Identity as dynamic unity. Identity is not a substance, but rather substance as process, or being as becoming. Yeah. And this is the joy principle. This idea of unity, connected. It's a feeling. So we have awareness, consciousness, and feeling as primal. So here we have the I am is the identity as dynamic unity. Again, the I am is identity as dynamic unity. So the last thing I'll say about the creator is the process of identity experiencing joy. So identity is awareness seeking consciousness. That is identity. Experiencing is consciousness seeking gnosis. Gnosis with the idea of lived experiential reality, like my lived experience, my idea of that I know through experience. So experience is consciousness seeking gnosis. And finally, joy is gnosis seeking joy. Okay. So it's just, well, I meant to say gnosis seeking convergence. That's what I meant to say. Gnosis seeking completion. That's joy. All right. So we have identity experiencing joy is a verb, is a noun, is the power behind the energy behind creation, if you will. And in the process of the creator creating and experiencing itself, it discovers along the way these enduring objects that structure more development. Now, I know that Whitehead was cautious about labeling metaphysical enduring objects. Is that right? I think he wanted to say that there might be something, but he wasn't quite sure.
Well, he would distinguish between enduring objects and eternal objects.
I meant eternal objects. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is
eternal objects.
Yeah, this is what I meant. Yeah.
Eternal objects are more of a metaphysical category. Enduring objects are more empirical. That's most of what we see around us: rocks, plants, animals, our own bodies. Yeah.
Well, the law of one would lean into the eternal object first and foremost as being the dynamic process of identity-seeking joy. It's just something that has to be there in order for everything to evolve. And then secondly, that there's been a process of self-discovery that has become metaphysical eternal objects. That was the process of experiencing becoming enduring objects that sheltered experience, and then had become so pivotal to the creator's own creative advance, that they essentially became metaphysical eternal objects, slash like a hybrid between eternal objects and enduring objects. Yeah. That would be the actual structure of consciousness, evolution as emerging from a denser body to a body would contain, it'd be very dense materially, but very undense in terms of consciousness. So you begin with like a first tier, a first density, rocks and things like this. A second tier would be plants and animal life. The third tier would be creation come to self-awareness. And so that Earth is a third density planet where we are made up of a material world, materiality, and inside of us, our capacity to begin to gain consciousness on the nature of our own becoming, and also the nature of the becoming of the larger macro. This really begins in earnest in third density. And so I'll conclude this part. I'm sorry, this is a little bit longer than I wanted it to be, but the big contrast that has happened on Earth is that as part of the Creator's own process of becoming, it discerned a concept that in third density, a veil of forgetting could be placed between basically God emerging in third density as a third density being without knowing it is God, and without knowing it is in union with everything else. So this veil of forgetting actually becomes, it's an incredible novel concept, because it actually allows in the intensification of experience like nothing else that had been applied before in the experiment of self-gnosis, the creator's gnosis. Because this intensification of self-awareness plus the inability to know self except through experience and developing contrasts creates a new kind of polarity that didn't exist before. Rock calls this, well, I guess I'm calling it ethical polarity, where you have a positive polarity, service to others, moving into wholeness, and a negative polarity, service to self, emphasizing domination and manipulation. These two polarities actually create work and intensity, and it's a new way of intensifying the third density experience for further evolution. And Earth is a unique cosmic experience, at least maybe in this galaxy, with this contrast between the planet having moved into its an environmental energetics of fourth density, which is love and understanding. It's this sense of unitive consciousness. So in a tier higher than ours, the Earth has moved into sort of a cosmic environment where is proper. It'd be like moving from third grade to fourth grade, where it would be proper to start learning the lessons of fourth density. But the Earth itself cannot begin a fourth density experience until and unless humanity as a single organism achieves some threshold of consciousness where it chooses to live the path of wholeness. And so this contrast, like a rubber band, where the Earth has moved, the body of the Earth has moved into fourth density consciousness in terms of like a bath, I'm sorry, not consciousness, but environment. And its stuckness of the third density collective humanity being completely stuck right here, this creates this contrast, this tension. And it's precisely in this tension right here, you and I maybe feel as like it's going crazy out here, you know. Everybody is, everybody's actually being invited metaphysically to look at themselves in the mirror and ask, what do we want individually and what do we want as a collective? But this tension right here actually creates the very novel opportunity for a higher order of being, a logos, to actually come face to face inside of third densities, Earth's third densities quagmire, and create something new here that would help humanity move past its collective bellicosity, but also to give the creator, as the sublogos, the sun, an experience that it didn't have before, which is to come inside, to descend inside at a conscious level and come face to face with itself in third, so you have the logos face to face with a third density entity. All right, so I'm sorry, I can realize that I'm talking some terms that may not be you may not be familiar with these, but could I ask you to weigh in on anything you've heard so far?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Very, very rich dynamic you're describing, and some of the terms are unfamiliar to me, but I think there's a lot of resonance and overlap in some of these esoteric systems, and so I'm not as familiar with the raw material, but the idea of Earth moving through different phases of density and the role of the human being in that process as tensions are increased resonates with what I've read in Steiner and anthroposophy, and there are similar patterns described. But to think about this in Whitehead's terms, and as you were describing earlier, the macro concrescence of the Earth, your scheme of thinking of these two opposing forces that find this hidden unity is very much like the process of concrescence, as you know. And this process, as Whitehead describes it, occurs at every scale. And so it's a quantum scale at the level of our cells, our organism, but the Earth as a whole is a process of concrescence, and in multiple time scales too, right? So the Earth through its entire, however long it lasts, billions of years through its whole history, is a process of concrescence, and these tensions build so that it can be transformed into something new at the end of its evolutionary process. And so, in Whitehead's terms, the affirmation, the original affirmation, say, is very much like the physical pole, and he describes the physical pole as conformal. It's saying yes to what came before, so it's just sort of repeating what came before. And the mental pole is something like the no. It's saying, well, here are the alternatives. And then the satisfaction is the reconciliation of this tension that gives rise to something new that hadn't existed before. It wasn't what was being repeated in the past. Something new has been introduced by the mental pole, but some reconciliation has been achieved between the original yes, the no that came in response to it, and then something new comes out of that. And so this Trinitarian process, or this law of three in your terms, to produce a fourth that is in some kind of new dimension, is, to me, it's, and probably this is intentional, but maybe you discovered the convergence here. It's exactly Whitehead's process of concrescence, but it's this Trinitarian creative process. Obviously, is deep. It's been in the not just Western, but back into the Vedic traditions, for thousands of years. This basic principle, which is cyclical but also creative, and this Trinity principle is at work everywhere, in the whole history of the Earth, in every organ system of our body, and every species, plant and animal. The Trinity is at work finding this balance and this reconciliation of these seemingly opposed forces. And what you're describing, I think, is a new creation narrative and a new understanding of how creation happens, that's evolutionary rather than but it's, Neoplatonists would have the idea of emanation. Some Christians insist on an idea of creation from nothing, creatio ex nihilo. And I think what you're proposing here is it's not necessarily in conflict, but it moves the dialectic forward a bit. I mean, the whole idea of conflict is what's crucial here, right? Because in an evolutionary understanding of the creative process, what's always happening is conflicts are being transformed into contrasts that bring forth something novel. And so it's a kind of continuous creation.
Let me just insert something right there, because you just said something. What I want to say there is, conflict is something we feel. So especially when I'm with a client or in my own life, I feel a conflict, and in that moment, there are the seeds of hope for a future joy, which would be in the concrescence, the achievement of satisfaction. But also in that moment is the shadow side of hope. So if hope is something buried in the soil of the conflict and then has a telos towards a future experience of joy, also are the seeds of anxiety, which has a telos towards an anticipation of a future terror. And so one of the things that I try to do right there is, when I acknowledge a person is going through a conflict, and we explore all of that, but to use a great analogy right there of how do we see a conflict and maybe expand, metanoia ourselves to seeing conflict as contrast, that is part of the sacred becoming, well, then I can focus in on the seeds of anxiety that we're feeling for a future terror is to slowly move them into seeing the other side of that, which are the seeds of hope moving towards and anticipating a future joy. And that is concomitant with seeing what we're in as a conflict, and then potentiating that idea of a conflict into and what it is actually is a contrast. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that would be a clinical application of what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. And I'm eager to have you move forward with what you're sharing to understand how you feel it connects to the Christ event. But it seems to me that not to prefigure too much of what you might say, but that this idea that the creator would enter into the creation, or that the divine would incarnate and become human and die, is quite a inversion. It's quite a heightening of the contrast that I think sets up the human community, and there are more of us on the planet than ever existed at once before. It heightens the pressure for us to transform.
Okay.
Because it's like the divine has already, in some sense, the seed for that future satisfaction of what the whole human community is here to do, what we're here to achieve. The seed's already been planted, and there's no turning back. But we're not all aware or conscious of that trajectory, and so there's still, it's still the opposing forces are meeting, and that tension is building, and maybe you had those two arrows with the awareness first and then consciousness as the tension increases. And I feel like the catapult hasn't been launched yet, but the tension is definitely still.
Some people don't feel the tension, but now we're starting to feel the tension, and people are becoming more aware of the tension, but not yet beginning the consciousness. Whereas other people are feeling super conscious of the tension, and then so the real issues are the conflicts between those who don't feel the conflict or the contrast, to those who feel it, are aware of it, but haven't begun to be conscious of it, from those who are conscious of it and want to do something. So it's kind of like, and all of this exists in one giant united organism that is unconscious of its unity, but we're moving into consciousness.
So there's really one human being.
Yeah, Adam. I think what did the Jewish faith, was it the Adam?
Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But that there are so many human beings on the planet today, it's like that increases the tension of that sort of the opposite direction to the understanding of human unity. But that just makes the sort of the potency of that, the anthropos, if you want, or the Adam Kadmon, of the realization of that, when that harmonization or that satisfaction is finally achieved, that the human community became so fragmented and particularized into 8 billion people on the planet right now. I feel like it only makes the eventual reunification that much more joyous when we recollect that fact.
And we have the hope, these are the seeds of hope in this contrast of that future consummation, of that future omega point. The omega point that I would nuance Teilhard de Chardin, where he talks about there's an omega point of all of, let's say, history. I think he didn't have to go so macro with it, because really I think he's talking about concrescence. And there's, as you said, there's different orders of concrescence, different tiers. I think we're in a concrescence right now. So I'm going to continue for the next few minutes. I know you have a hard stop at your time, but we can, if this is interesting, well, we can pick it up at a different time. But what I want to share is the way I try to understand this is that instead of looking at the humanity as a single entity right now and talk about our evolution, I want to move up one more tier and talk about our, if you will, local logos evolution. So the law of one material would posit that every galaxy is a logos, is its own focusing, creative principle, joy, dynamic that desires to express itself. And it does so in unique ways. And then inside of that body, that galactic logos, there are going to be sub-logoi. So this is the next order down. And these are not all the stars, but certain stars where natural movements of the physical chaos start to coalesce and become, have order. And then that order starts to potentiate into a crescendo where consciousness comes, and the consciousness of that sub-logos, the way that sub-logos develops is actually subdividing into sub-sub-logoi, and then it's the experience of the sub-sub-logoi that actually give the sub-logos its experience of itself in consciousness. Not awareness. Awareness is already complete unity with all. But in terms of consciousness, it is precisely the gestalt of the sub-sub-logoi interacting with itself becomes the consciousness of the sub-logos. And so as a development pattern of developing in terms of the higher order than us, but the lower order than a galactic, which is the sub-logos level, that's our sun, and the solar system is its body, then as part of that development, and this is speculation, but this is how I'm trying to put a bunch of stuff together, is as part of that development is it actually at some point, the whole concrescence of itself will achieve a certain necessity for it to have the experience of coming into its own sub level, because it's a sub-logos, coming into its own sub level in its fullness, in its plenum, and then face to face with itself. So there's a higher tier coming into a lower tier. It'd be like you having complete and total fullness of matness, and then coming in and connecting inside of one of your cells. Matt being fully enlightened as Matt, coming face to face with a cancer cell, and then maybe teaching the cancer cell how to remember what it is, or something along those lines. In order for there to be a portal, if you will, in order for this tier 2 to come into tier 3, if I could put it that way, the sub coming into sub-sub, in order for that to happen, at the level of the sub-sub area, that's us, there has to be a lot of different concresci coming together in order to create a singularity to which this could come inside. Okay? And that singularity would be the following. At least this is my speculation. So we have one ingredient is the sub-logos, or the sun logos development. That's the developmental process. We also have a volunteer. Okay, so the entity known to us is Jesus, according to the raw material. Now this is, no one has to really believe this. This is just kind of fun. We're having fun here. But there was a need to have, you could call it maybe a bodhisattva-esque person, somebody with a vocation of a bodhisattva that had achieved enlightenment elsewhere in the galaxy, because there's all kinds of ways to understand UFOs and aliens, and I've done a lot of work on this. But you have a being who volunteers to incarnate as a third density entity and on Earth. So you have to have somebody who wants to do that. You also have to have this idea of the cultural runway. So the whole relationship, the I-thou relationship between the Jewish people and the sub-logos, this dance of a continued revelation of relationship, a chosenness. Not chosenness as in they're only special, but chosenness as kind of a runway, if you will, that is embedded inside a historical, cultural event that becomes a zeitgeist. Everything is oriented and all the thought forms are developed so that there could be a kind of crescendo in the fullness of time. All right, so that's the cultural runway. And then you've got, as I said earlier, a contrast between the cosmic green ray, so the Earth has moving, the sub-logos as the solar system has moved inside the galactic logos's body in an area where it's green ray, where in terms of the chakras, it is love and understanding. It is this new freshness, this new openness that's here. Okay? So the Earth is in here. Humanity's consciousness is still trying to figure out the orange ray. Orange ray in terms of the chakra system is, who are you? What is your identity? And the orange ray is actually a dance between I am one, which is red, and I am many, which is yellow. So this negotiation is an emergence. That's the sense of self as a dance, an emergence of I am one and many. That's that polarity. And we still haven't gotten there yet. Mostly individually, but of course collectively. So this anchor, the stuckness, plus Earth moving into the green ray, creates this incredible tension. And that is actually part of the plan. That's part of the development of the logos. So therefore, all of these things come together to create the capacity for the logos, the sub-logos to come in face to face, and also for there to be given, planted inside a thought form, planted exactly in the epicenter of the log jam, the quagmire that we have created, which I call the great bellicosity thought form. It's competition it's competition warped and cancerized to a warfare posturing. It's competition taken to warfare posturing whose energetics is scapegoating. And that's a great way to not develop the orange ray. And so this tension on us, we feel this great need to look in the mirror and figure it out. And the only way to relieve, the law of one says, the only way to dispel or reconcile the logjam, to dispel the energy of bellicosity, is forgiveness. And forgiveness is simply, I am recognizing that I am God in the process of becoming God who has a pace. And I'm recognizing you are God in the process of becoming God. And it's this desire to commune together. A person in that unit of consciousness would be able to see the other with the eyes of forbearance, even as the other is living out the bellicosity and not even knowing it. Okay. Now, the seeds of forgiveness are planted right there at the epicenter of the bellicosity thought form, which is at the epicenter of the human person. It's a thought form we have created, and then that thought form becomes so strong and sentient that it actually starts to create us. It's like an AI that starts to then, create us. And so we become its creators, and then it desires to create more through us, the energy that keeps it intensifying. So you have this sort of like torus field that there's no escape, the Hotel California kind of thing. You can check in, but you can never leave. And that's not a problem at the level of the sun logos, because that's exactly the conditions in terms of the sub-logos concrescence to create that tension so that it could come to face, and humanity could come face to face, and then enter into the energetics of the Jesus Christ event, which becomes a thought form developed by these ingredients. The sub-logos develop the volunteer, the cultural runway, and this cosmic conflict. This becomes a thought form of forgiveness, mercy, love, compassion, all of this. And you can put on the mind of Christ. And then Christ comes inside you, and it's the fullness, the plenum of the logos that is coming inside the third density body at our invitation. And it's a constant ritual of kenosis that one has to have in order, like an adept level, to both be myself and to allow that which is transcendent to me to incarnate in me and work through me. Like that is itself a dance, a perichoresis. But doing so actually raises up the entire vibrational bandwidth, the consciousness bandwidth of third density to move into fourth density. And that's that consummation. The seeds of the ecclesia have been planted and are in the moment of concressing into a convergence. How does this sound? Sorry, I may have lost you, or I may not be speaking very clearly.
I mean, I'm following a lot of it, and I think this idea of the logos or the sub-logos, the sun-logos needing this cultural runaway, and then the volunteer. Yeah, I think that's a really rich way of describing this process. And what's happening now with this bellicosity that's sort of we're stuck in this feedback loop, is that what initially was a cultural runway and this sort of birth of both a sense of the universality of something, which was initially particular. And I think that's part of what happens when the religion of the ancient Israelites meets the philosophy of the ancient Greeks. You get this sense of what was special in this relationship between Yahweh and the Jews. After the Christ event, it starts to mix more and more with this Greek sense of logos and the sense of the universality of this revelation. This is not just for you, this is for everyone. And that's something that, as I hear you describing it, we're still very much struggling with. The tension between being special and being universal. And I, this is I don't mean to single out Judaism or Jewish people now, certainly, but there is a sense in which the cultural runways, which have been part of the evolution of consciousness that has prepared humanity for the Christ event, the cultural runway has become something more like runaway culture, by which I mean we're locked into these identities that are fabricated. The sense of I'm this kind of person and you're that kind of person, and that smaller sense of identity is ultimate, and that's blocking the transformation that needs to occur. And the pressure is building, and these geopolitical conflicts are it's hard to say if we look back decades from now and think, oh, it already started. It's because from where you and I sit, it's like, okay, we're not at war yet. We're maybe we can avoid this, but on the other hand, for a lot of people around the world now already, it started. Like there's a great conflagration that's underway, and we've seen a couple of those last century, and we certainly have even more firepower now. If another world war were to break out, that things would be bad news. So that seems to me to be a function of runaway culture or you could say nationalism, where these smaller senses of identity are blocking the realization that you're talking about. And it's the convergence of these different factors. In some sense, the deed's already been accomplished, but only in heaven, as it were.
Well, and I know you need to end, but I just want to say that the point of the Jesus Christ event for our side, let's say, would be to plant the seeds of consciousness, and then for humanity then to choose to water those seeds and enact those seeds. So that has to be something that's organic here. And maybe the next conversation, if you're interested, we could have is I've developed this program called the SHIPS approach, which is precisely how to be the micro person that creates some of this loosening of the bellicosity. But I'd be very interested in hearing how you would understand a praxis of Whiteheadian thought or process thought, to bring it to the level of using philosophy or to help people unlock the runaway culture and get back into a desire, an orientation towards this concrescent satisfaction, that we're going to be moving to anyways, but we have to do that too. We have to. It's us.
Yeah, I think it's both a move to the macrocosm and a move deeper into each of our individuality.
Exactly.
Away from this confusing middle space of these collective identities that are, increasingly fabricated. I don't mean to be overly dismissive of, the importance of culture in people's lives, but I think if we lose the larger cosmic process that we are participants in, and if we lose our own unique individual contribution as spirits to that process, and we get stuck in the middle, we're not, we got to hold the tension between the extremes to find the passageway through.
That's right.
So this is a very interesting and important conversation, and I think translating some of your insights from the the materials you're working with and into not only into Whitehead but into some other esoteric streams that I've been working with would be of great interest to me, because that kind of translation work I think is important for making this all more accessible, so that consciousness can spread, because there's so many, whether it's through channeling or through clairvoyance or through deep speculative philosophy, different perspectives that have been achieved and articulated, but unless we can build the bridges and translate between them, I think it remains too obscure for people for it to actually be a benefit to most people. So,
and that's where my interest is, helpful. Right there. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll be in touch. We can connect some more and maybe come up with another time to connect.
Sounds good. Yeah. Summer's pretty open, so we can make that happen sooner than later.
Okay. And I'm also attending the class you'll be doing. I think it's starting this Wednesday.
Oh, are you? Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That'll be fun.
So I'll be excited.
Awesome. All right, Doug. Well, I'll see you in a few days then.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate your work. Take care.
Likewise.
Bye.
Take care, Doug.
Recording stopped.